Hello, guys. I'm Megan. I am the mother of a wonderful boy who is a preteen now. I won't take my son's name here because he is not an adult yet, and I would like to protect his privacy. So, my son came into my life when he was 3 years old. I have major fertility problems, and the doctor said that I could never have kids. My husband, Jack, and I were devastated. I can't begin to tell you what a bad phase we had gone through. We desperately wanted a child, and God fulfilled that wish of ours when we were able to adopt my baby boy. My child came from a single mother who wasn't fit to take care of him anymore. He was only 3 years old, but he was a very bright child and still is. We spent 2 years being a very happy family until tragedy struck and our life changed forever. We found out that my boy had a serious heart defect. It was likely that he would suffer for his entire life. The diagnosis shook our world. But it also gave me the spirit to fight for my child and make sure that he gets better. However, my husband was a different case altogether. On the day of the diagnosis, I noticed that my husband had been awfully quiet on our way back home. He didn't talk at all since we found out about our little boy's diagnosis. I was a little worried about his attitude, but chalked it up to him being sad and worried about our kid. But for some reason, I didn't like the look on his face at all. He looked more angry than anything. His words back at the hospital were also a little off, but I thought that he was just panicking and didn't know what to say. When we reached home, I let him have some space and didn't bother him on the drive either. I wanted him to take time to come to terms with what we had discovered. I needed some time to think as well, so I thought that the space would do us good. What should have been a day of coming to terms with the diagnosis actually turned to a week. My husband didn't protest the lack of communication because he literally wasn't talking to me. He did make short replies when I asked him mundane questions, but beyond that, he didn't talk to me. He also didn't mention our son and refused to reply to anything I wanted to discuss about him. Before anything jumps to conclusions and thinks that I didn't communicate with him, let me tell you something. I did try to talk to him about everything. I wasn't going to just let the lack of communication become a problem for us. I almost begged him to talk to me one day. All he did was walk away and shut himself in the guest room. The fact that he wasn't interacting with our son or even looking at him was also evident. Our son noticed it too and started asking questions about why his father wasn't loving him anymore. It was a hard situation I was in, and I prioritized getting my son the medical help he needed over harassing my husband for communication. Around 10 days passed and the situation didn't get any better. My son was in a stable condition and the doctors were chalking out a treatment plan for him. Overall, my son was doing well, which gave me the time and energy to confront my husband about what was going on. I chose a weekend to sit down and talk to him so that he would tell me what was going on in his head. I sat him down and practically begged him, saying, "What's going on, Jack? Please tell me what's going on. Why have you grown so cold?" "Nothing is going on, Megan. I am just tired. I work long hours and rarely have time to chill anymore." "You and I both know that is not true, Jack. Why are you making excuses? Just tell me what's wrong." "I already told you that nothing is wrong. Just leave me alone. What is your problem? You have been so cold to me and our son for the past 10 days. You don't even hold him or talk to him anymore, Jack. He misses you and keeps asking if you don't love him anymore. Well, you can tell him whatever you want, just don't bother me about it." Jack was acting nonchalant again and refusing to engage in a conversation with me. I kept trying to make him talk and even told him how his actions were hurting our child. He didn't seem to care about our child's feelings at all. My husband was literally dismissing my concerns and the problems his attitude was creating. After a lot of back and forth, I had enough. I had been thinking of how his change of attitude happened right after we got our son's diagnosis. For the past few days, I had been wondering if the diagnosis was causing problems with Jack. Maybe he wasn't able to accept the diagnosis completely. I was really scared to ask him this next part. This is about our son's diagnosis, isn't it, Jack? Are you having a hard time accepting his diagnosis? I have already accepted his diagnosis, Megan, but I don't know if I am Okay with it? What do you mean, Jack? I don't know if I am okay having such a sick child in my life. My heart absolutely broke when I heard what my husband said. I was expecting him to say that he found it hard to cope with the diagnosis and that he was worried about our son. Anyone would have if they were in our shoes. I was also going out of my mind thinking about what the future would look like. But my thoughts were more concentrated on how I would manage to keep my son healthy. My husband, on the other hand, said that he didn't want to have a sick child in his life. I was absolutely appalled by what he said. I said, "What are you saying, Jack? How can you talk about our son like that? Why are you villainising me, Megan?" Having a kid with health complications is hard. He would literally drain us mentally and financially. What is wrong with you, Jack? Are you really just concerned about those things right now? Our child needs our support right now, and all you are thinking about is how he is going to be a burden on us. That's because he will be a burden on us, Megan. How can you even think this way, Jack? He is our child. We have to take these responsibilities as parents. If you are having a hard time dealing with all of this, I think you should see a therapist. Maybe we can join the couples counseling. I am willing to try anything. But you need to get over this issue of yours, Jack. Despite what he said, I tried to be supportive of his feelings. People may get overwhelmed in situations, and sometimes it's not fair to judge them so soon. That's what I thought after this conversation. I strongly suggested that we join therapy so that we can come to terms with everything that was happening. But to my despair, Jack absolutely refused to attend therapy. He simply kept saying that he didn't need it. Over the next few days, I tried hard to gently bring up therapy to him and convince him to give it a try. Things were still tense at home because Jack was still acting cold and not interacting with our son. I was pretty emotionally drained from handling a sick and upset toddler along with the tantrums of an adult. I was really at the end of my wits. A few days later, Jack told me that he needed to talk about this issue. My mother was babysitting my son so that my husband and I could have a conversation in private. I had a lot of hope in my mind that maybe my husband was finally seeing reason. He seemed a little cheerful that day, so I thought that maybe he was changing his mind for good. When we sat down to talk, I had excitedly asked him, "So, have you thought anything about therapy? Are you going to join one?" "Why would I join therapy, Megan? There is nothing wrong with me. The way you have been handling the current situation isn't healthy, Jack. Therapy will help you sort your feelings better. Look, I am entitled to feel the way I do, Megan. I don't think I am being unreasonable." My hopes had started to wane at this point because my husband clearly hadn't realized how wrong his thoughts were. I immediately felt my face drop when he acted like nothing was wrong with his thought process. I was dreading what he would say next, but I had to sit through the conversation to find out. I decided to take a final chance and make him understand that he was wrong. So I said, "But you are being unreasonable, Jack. You have to see how you are hurting me and our son." "Look, I already know what the future will be like with our son in the picture, so I have come up with a solution to make things better." "Really? What solution do you have, Jack?" "I think we should give him back." "Excuse me, Jack. What did you say?" "We should put him back for adoption." "Maybe we can contact the agency and see if anyone is willing to take him off our hands. I am sure someone will come forward, or he can go to foster care for all I care. He just won't be our problem anymore, and we can just go back to having a normal life like before." Guys, I felt like I had been struck by thunder. Out of all things, I hadn't expected my husband to come up with this solution. I was literally shocked to my core and desperately praying that this was a nightmare or a sick joke. But one look at my husband made it clear to me that he was dead serious. He was literally telling me to give up our child for adoption because of his heart defects. The nonchalant way he had said those words absolutely broke me from the inside. It was like I didn't even recognize the man anymore. He went on, talking about how our life would be great after we give our son up for adoption. I was in such disbelief that I said, "What? What are you saying, Jack? Do you really want to give up our son for adoption? Yes, that's the best solution right now. Actually, that's the only solution since I am not interested in raising a diseased child. For God's sake, Jack, this is our child you are talking about. Think about it, Jack. You are asking me to give our child up for adoption. Well, he technically isn't our son. So I grew even more alarmed when he brought that up. In the 2 years that had passed, I never found myself questioning if my husband was truly happy with our son. He had been a dedicated father and a good partner as well. We always talked about how lucky we were to have our son in our lives. But at that point, I had a nagging feeling in my gut. Instead of keeping quiet like before, I directly asked him the question, "Tell me something, Jack. Would you have made this decision if he was our biological child?" That would have been different. Just answer my question, Jack. Would you have given up your biological child if he was diagnosed with a disease like this? No, maybe I wouldn't have given him up. I let out a humorless laugh when my husband confirmed my suspicions. I really don't know why this man had agreed to adopt a child in the first place. A person who thinks this way should never have anything to do with adoption. My husband was proving to be the person I never thought he was. All those years, he had carefully hidden away this cruel and selfish part of his personality. Now that we had faced a big hurdle, he was showing his true colors. I was really done talking to him. With a bitter laugh, I said, "So, our son gets this special treatment from you just because he is adopted, right? Look, this child is not my biological child, so I have no obligation to be tied to him. You shouldn't be tied to him either. No matter what, adopted children will never be your real children. I cannot have real children, Jack. Even if I did, I would never think like you. My son is not disposable just because he is adopted. I consider myself his mother in all senses." "Oh, come on, Megan. We can always adopt another child. Maybe try surrogacy for this time. The kid's own mother didn't want him. Why would you?" "Stop it, Jack. Stop right there." You don't have to degrade yourself anymore to sell your point. I have made my decision. I won't give up my son. Jack didn't look shocked because he knew that I wouldn't give up my son so easily. His face clearly says that he had fully expected me to throw a tantrum and protect my child, so he had come prepared with what he would say next. My husband was well aware of the fact that I wouldn't agree with his horrible logic. That's why he stopped trying to convince me and resorted to another method. He looked at me in anger and said, "So, you won't give him up? Not even when I am telling you that I don't want him around? I am not giving up my son, Jack. No matter what you say, I won't change my mind." "Well, in that case, I will have to rethink this marriage, Megan." That was the second unexpected blow I had received that day. I hadn't thought that Jack would literally threaten to leave me over his stupid issues. I thought that he was better than that. Never in a million years did I think that he would ask me to choose between my child and our marriage. I was absolutely enraged and shocked. I said, "Excuse me, Jack, what did you say?" I said that I will be rethinking this marriage if you insist on keeping this useless child in our lives. "You can't be serious, Jack." "Oh, I am dead serious, Megan. Either he is out or you both are." Yes, my husband threatened to throw me out of the house with our son if I didn't give him up for adoption. He looked determined and wanted our son to be gone. I will be honest with you guys here. I really didn't know if Jack was serious about his threat or simply bluffing and blackmailing me to have his way. I didn't know what was going through his mind, but I knew what my mind and heart were telling me to do. I didn't make a fuss or start to yell at Jack. I didn't even cry. I simply put on a determined face and said, "Okay then, so be it. So you will give up the child for adoption?" "No, I will give you up instead." What? What are you saying, Megan? You will give up our perfectly good marriage for a random sick kid? He is my kid, Jack. He is my son. And this isn't a perfectly good marriage since I clearly didn't know what a cruel and heartless man my husband was. Now that I do, I see no reason to continue this sham of a marriage anymore. You have lost your mind, Megan. I am telling you that I am not bluffing. I will really kick you both out. This house is mine, so you will have nowhere else to go. You will lose your marriage and the beautiful life you had. I don't care about this stupid marriage anymore, Jack. I am done with you. You wanted me to make a choice, right? Well, I choose divorce. Jack looked like he wasn't expecting me to say this. Well, that makes the two of us. I wasn't expecting to ask for a divorce one fine weekend, but there it was. After I made my decision clear to him, Jack started to shout and argue with me. I was only thankful that my son was away and couldn't hear the trash his father was spewing. It would have broken him. Jack and I had a huge fight where it became clear that he wasn't expecting me to leave him. He kept trying to tell me that I was choosing some random kid over him. It was an ugly fight, but I stood firm on my decision. That night, I packed a bag and went to stay with my mom. Jack yelled at me and told me that I better not come back again. He didn't have to tell me that because I wasn't even going to try. Getting my son back in the house wasn't an option because I didn't know what Jack would start spewing. So I knew that the best option would be to pack the essentials and move in with my mother. My mother already knew what was going on and supported me in my decision. That night, I cried into her lap while she comforted me and assured me that everything would be all right. Mothers are a great blessing, you know. It was my mom who always inspired me to be a better person. It is partly because of her that I was able to take such a huge step in raising my child alone. Jack and I eventually got a divorce, just like I said. He tried his best to change my mind and make me give up our son. It took us a lot of ugly fights to finally go to court. During this time, I had to explain to my son that his father and I were separating. You can only imagine what was going through the poor boy's head. I had to put him in therapy so that he wouldn't be scarred from this whole event. I also understood that it would be important to make Jack give up his rights to my son. He had made it clear even in court that he wanted nothing to do with my son. Having my ex-husband's toxic presence in my son's life would make things worse for the poor child. So I went ahead and agreed to have Jack's rights terminated. He got out of paying child support, and I didn't take alimony. I didn't want any ties to him either. My child was my priority, and I wanted to start afresh. After the divorce, I had to go through a lot of emotional and financial troubles. It was hard seeing my son as a single parent. Plus, we had a mountain of medical debt that only kept increasing. Times were tough, and we didn't have a very good life, but my child was thriving and happy to be surrounded by people who loved him. I never regretted my actions because I knew I did it for my son. Yes, there were problems I had to face, but God sent me an unexpected solution to that. One day when I was off work, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, I saw a very sophisticated woman standing outside. At first, I thought that she had the wrong house, but then she said that her name was Nina, and she started to talk about my son's birth mother. I invited her in because I wanted to know who she was and why she was at my house. She didn't look dangerous and seemed to be curious about my son. When we finally sat down, I asked her, "So what brings you here, Nina?" "I am sorry, but I am a little confused. My son's birth mother never mentioned you." That's because she didn't quite know me personally. I didn't know about her until a few weeks ago, too. "Oh, okay. This just makes me even more confused. Can you tell me why you are here?" "I have come to see my grandson, Megan." Your grandson?" "Yes, Megan. Your son is actually my biological grandson." I was shocked when I heard what Nina said. I had no idea what she was talking about. I knew that my son's birth mother was disowned by her parents, and her mother never wanted to be involved in the child's life. I also knew what she looked like, so I could say for sure that Nina wasn't my son's maternal grandmother. The birth mother didn't know who the father was because she hadn't put his name on the birth certificate, so I was confused about what Nina was saying. I said, I don't know what you are talking about, Nina. I know that you are not related to the birth mother's side. I know what her mother looks like. Ooh, I am not related to her. I am actually from the child's father side. My son is the biological father of your child. But that can't be true. The birth father was never listed because the mother didn't know who it was. I am really ashamed of this part, but I guess I owe you the truth, Megan. The birth mother did not know who the father was. They had a DNA test and everything. My son didn't want to be a father, so he bribed her not to put his name on the birth certificate. The poor girl played into his plan and did just that. Oh my God, that is horrible. I know, Megan, I was completely unaware of the situation, or else I wouldn't have allowed it to happen, you see. We are sort of wealthy, so my son used his money to shut her up. But after a few years, he stopped sending her money, and so the girl decided to give up my grandson for adoption. I don't blame her one bit. She was in a tough spot with her PPD and financial trouble. My son wasn't very generous with her. I was in shock when I heard the whole story. To be very honest, the birth mother had seemed to be a slightly mentally unstable woman, and the adoption agency had confirmed that. The CPS had concerns about her raising the child, especially with her PPD. Her financial situation was also pretty bad, which made it difficult for her to raise the child. We did wonder how she managed to stay afloat for 3 years when she kept getting fired from her jobs. Turns out, Sixie birth father had been giving her money to keep her quiet. When Nina told me a little more about her family, I immediately recognized them. They actually are a very influential family in the city due to their old business. They also had a lot of connections, which was why the birth mother was scared of revealing the truth. I was very overwhelmed with all the information and said, "Thank you for giving me the context of everything, Nina. I am sorry, but I can't allow my son to see you at this moment. This is a lot to take in." I understand that, Megan. I know this can be overwhelming. I won't pressure you into anything, but please let me have some relationship with my grandson. Please don't punish me and our family for my son's mistake. He has been cut off already, so he will never be a problem. I really need time, Nina. I need to confirm everything and talk to the adoption agency too. I understand that, Megan. I actually talked to the birth mother and the adoption agency too. You will get a call from them eventually. Sorry, I just couldn't wait, so I came here to introduce myself, but I push you, my dear. You are his mom now, so you can take time to think this through. Nina left that day and didn't text or call even when I gave her my phone number. She asked me to contact her when I made up my mind. She stuck to her promise and never pushed for anything. I ultimately had a talk with the adoption agency and they confirmed everything. Basically, your birth mother had a copy of the DNA tests, so that made things easier as well. It was a tiring process, but the truth about the situation had been established. Nina was really my son's biological grandmother. So I had no problem letting Nina visit my home and meet with my son. She is a very kind and caring lady and never pushed my boundaries. She also had a lot of respect for me and often complimented me for raising my son right. My son was also happy to have another grandma in his life. Overall, things were going great. But one day, things got even better for me. Nina had randomly come to me and said, "Thank you for letting me have a relationship with my grandson, Megan. I really owe you big time." "Don't mention it, Nina. I can see you love my son already. None of this was your fault anyway, so why would I keep you from him? Also, I really appreciate you not being pushy. You are a really inspiring woman, Megan. I want to thank you for raising my grandson and taking such good care of him. Well, he is now my son. Now this is my responsibility. I would do anything for him. I heard what happened with your marriage. It's such a shame, but I would say that you are better off without a man like that. Speaking of which, I think you have some medical debt from my grandson's treatment and therapy, right? Yeah, it is quite a lot, actually. Jack took half of it, but back then the bills were small. Now it's a different story." You know what? Leave those bills to me. I will take care of it. What? What were you saying, Nina? You are the mother of my grandson. I don't want you to be buried in debt when I am perfectly capable of helping you. Send me all your details. The debt will be gone. I will give you a separate credit card for his hospital bills. You will use that from now on. And I will send you a monthly allowance for you and your son. You two are family now, and I want you both to be taken care of. And I want you both to be taken care of. I was at a loss for words at Nina's offer. Eventually, I recovered and tried to convince Nina that she didn't need to do this for me. I don't like taking handouts, as you can tell, so taking money from Nina wasn't an option for me. But Nina was persistent and made me understand that ultimately the money would help my son have a better life. At the end of the day, Nina and her family wanted to do this out of love and not just responsibility. So, for the sake of my child, I accepted her help. I continued going to work as I did after getting divorced. However, with Nina's help, I didn't have to worry about anything. Most of my money went into savings while the rest was for utilities. I had already started to set up funds for my son so that he never had to worry about money again. I knew that he had a hard time ahead of him, so he needed all the help he could. Nina and I also made the decision to shift to a bigger hospital with better resources. Now that she was paying the medical bills, I was able to get much better care for my son. He is doing really well now, and the difference is stark. Now, this is where I tell you about how my husband found out about everything. Well, he was actually friends with a family member of Nina. You can say that the family member was sort of helping Jack fund his new business. Not many people in the family knew my connection to Jack since I never gave his name. So the two of us had no idea that we would meet again at the party this family member threw. That's when he found out about the whole thing. He gingerly walked up to me and said, "Hey, Nina, it's nice seeing you here. You look really good. God, I have missed you." Well, I haven't missed you even a little bit, but thanks for the compliment. So, is our son with you right now? He is my son, Jack. You gave up your rights to him, remember? It was a long time ago, Megan. I made a very rash decision, and I am not proud of it. I realize now that I made a mistake. Oh, so now you are not proud of your decision? Why is that, Jack? Because you suddenly saw that my son ended up being related to a rich family? Now that's very convenient, Jack. Jack did have the sense to look a little ashamed. He couldn't fool me anymore. He knew well enough that I wouldn't believe his sudden change of heart. He gulped loudly, but somehow still continued to talk nonsense, saying, "I know that I made a lot of mistakes, Megan. I hurt you and our son, but you have to see that I was scared. I loved our son. Oh, please stop that nonsense right now, Jack. I don't want to hear your lies anymore. You cannot change what happened with your poor excuses." Okay, I won't make excuses, Megan, but I really want my family back. Can we start over? Can you give me a chance to rebuild our life? I really miss you and our son. Please, give me a chance to make things better. I simply laughed at him and his audacity. Now that Jack knew that my son was related to a rich family, he thought he could come back and ask for forgiveness. He even had the audacity to ask me to take him back. All I could do was laugh because of how ridiculous the situation was. I was laughing while Jack kept asking me to forgive him. At one point, Nina and the family member who knew Jack came to talk to us. That's when they realized who Jack was. Oh, boy. You should have seen Jack's face because he was embarrassed as anything. After the party, Jack actually escalated and started to beg me to take him back. He showed up at my office and even at my house. He kept begging me to take him back. I simply shut the door on his face and threatened to call the cops on him. I later learned that his friend was pulling his funds from his business because of what he did to me and my son. So Jack was panicking. He thought that maybe if he could convince me to take him back, everything would go back to normal. So he desperately begged me to take him back or give him money to help fund his business. Suffice it to say, I said no to both of those requests and kicked him to the curb. Now his business is failing as word has spread around, and he is suffering the karma that came from his actions.